you and I. My invitation wrapped in a sigh. Dance with me. Let me touch your face in love. Come dance with me. And I will be all that you need. Your food, your drink, the air you breathe, the beating of your heart, child. Dance with me. 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 Let me touch your face in love. see your face, and my shame is gone on the cool white breeze of grace. You sought me out and draw me on in the lilting strains of a silent song. The gentle pull of your loving call to the knowledge of you, my God of all. Spirit wings unfurl, and in your embrace we are alone while the music of stillness plays. Teaching now of any kind, your heart's desire to hold me close, share heaven's dance with the one you chose. Nothing else is there for me. What sweeter thing could there ever be than this joy too high to rise above, to dance with God and to be His beloved?
Well, good morning, everybody. All we need to do is get our singers up here because it's all a cappella today, or like we like to say, Acapulco. We're going to do a little cliff diving here. Giving you a microphone. Here. You have the mic here. You're right over here. So, would you like? Do you want to hold the mic?
Angels we have heard on high, sweetly singing o'er the plains, and the mountains they reply, echoing their joyous strains. Gloria in excelsis Deo, Gloria in excelsis Deo. Shepherds, why this jubilee? Why your joyous strains prolong? What the gladsome tidings be, which inspire your heavenly song? Gloria in excelsis Deo, Gloria in excelsis Deo. Come to Bethlehem and see him whose birth the angels sing. Come adore on bended knee Christ the Lord, the newborn King. Gloria in excelsis Deo, Gloria in excelsis Deo. See him in a manger lay, whom the choirs of angels praise. Mary, Joseph, lend your aid, while our hearts in love we raise. Gloria in excelsis Deo, Gloria in excelsis Deo. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room.
And heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and
heaven and nature sing. Joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ, while fields and hills and plains.
Repeat the sounding
Repeat
joy.
the sounding joy. Repeat the sounding joy. Repeat the sounding joy. No more let sins and sorrows grow, nor thorns infest the ground. He comes to make his blessings flow.
For as the curse is
For as the curse is found, for as the curse is found, for as the curse is found, he rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness,
and wonders of
and
his
wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love.
Oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. Oh, come ye to Bethlehem. Come and behold him, born the King of angels. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. Sing, choirs of angels, sing in exaltation. Sing, all ye citizens of heaven above. Glory to God, glory in the highest. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. Yea, Lord, we greet thee, born this happy morning. Jesus, to thee be all glory give. Word of the Father, now in flesh appearing. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord.
So God imparts to human hearts the blessings of his hand. No ear may hear his coming, but in this world of sin, where meek souls will receive him still, the dear Christ enters in. Where children pure and happy pray to the blessed child, where misery cries out to thee, Son of the Mother mild, where charity stands watching, and faith holds wide the door. The dark night wakes, the glory breaks, and Christmas comes once more. O holy child of Bethlehem, descend to us, we pray. Cast out our sin and enter in. Be born in us today. We hear the Christmas angels, the great glad tidings tell. Oh, come to us, abide with us, our Lord Emmanuel.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. Round yon virgin mother and child, holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep in heavenly peace. Silent night, holy night, shepherds quake as the sun, glory stream from heaven afar. Heavenly hosts sing Alleluia. Christ the Savior is born. Christ the Savior is born. Silent night, holy night, Son of God, love's pure light, radiant beams from thy holy face. With the dawn of redeeming grace, Jesus
the Savior is born. Christ the Savior is born.
Okay, now we're doing better. I actually turned it off instead of on. I really like singing the Christmas songs. There is so much meaning and so much depth, and it's just not Christmas without singing the old Christmas hymns. Do you agree with that? Well, we have next week, we have a fellowship, and we want you to bring your Christmas leftovers, plus anything else you want to bring. And we would like for you to come dressed up with something Christmassy. So there might just be a few awards given around for your Christmas decorations. Let's try this here. I said this is bound to be a disaster, but we'll just do the best we can. But you can wear your favorite Christmas hat or ugly Christmas sweater or scarf or whatever. But it'd be kind of fun, I thought, if we kind of dressed up Christmassy a little bit and kind of closed up after Christmas next week. So wear something Christmassy. We'll let the kids go off and they can have their kids' class. The sad thing is I don't know how to turn that thing off exactly. But next week we will be talking about the coming of Jesus. And today we're going to talk to begin with about a sign that a few Christmases ago I saw up. Maureen and I were together and we saw this sign, and the sign said, "I believe." And I thought, wow, what a great sign. It doesn't say too much. It just says enough, I believe. And I was getting all kind of juiced up about that, and Maureen said, "You do know what that's talking about." And I thought to myself, of course I know what it's talking about. I mean, I believe in Jesus. I believe in the manger and the angels and the wise men and the shepherds. And yeah, I believe the Christmas story and God coming. I mean, I'm going through all these things in my mind. And she says, I believe as in, I believe in Santa Claus. I was so disheartened by it. Well, today's lesson is neither for nor against the man, okay? But we are going to talk about what we believe, because it's important to get what we believe right. And it's important we understand what we believe, and getting it right kind of reminded me of this cartoon that's coming up. And it reads, "Why you turned off spell check. We'll just issue a whole line of cards that wish people a happy holiday, seasons creepings, and joy to the world." So in Christmas, we want to get it right. And that is our bumper sticker. Our bumper sticker today is, "I believe." And I believe, and one of the reasons I believe is because of the prophecies that were made about Jesus. And these prophecies were made hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus came. Now, some people would think, well, it might have been made, but how do you know Christians didn't come and doctor those prophecies up? I mean, how do you know that we didn't kind of come and just change things to fit the Jesus story? But in fact, most of the Old Testament has been discovered in places like the Dead Sea Scrolls, among other ruins that predate Christianity by hundreds of years. I mean, we actually have manuscripts of these documents that come hundreds of years before the birth of Jesus. And so it's not like Christians could come in there after the fact and doctor them up. So we're going to talk about some of the prophecies of why we believe in these prophecies that predated Jesus. And at first we're going to look at what we might call foreshadowing. And so number one is, I believe because of the incidental details that foreshadow the birth of Jesus. So for example, the wise men. And 700 years before Jesus was born, Isaiah wrote about gifts of gold and incense which would come from afar. These are gifts that were fit for a king. So this isn't exactly a prophecy, but it is a foreshadowing of the wise men coming to see baby Jesus. And then 580 years before Jesus was born, Jeremiah wrote about Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted. We learned that this was actually a prophecy that was made that was foreshadowing after Jesus was born. King Herod killed the innocent babies in and around Bethlehem. And this foreshadowed that. And then 750 years before Jesus was born, Hosea said, "Out of Egypt I called my son." And this is because with the slaughter of the babies, an angel warned Joseph and Mary to take the baby and to flee to Egypt. They went to Egypt. It would be necessary for them to come back. And so God called his son back. And of course, Matthew 2:15 talks about this, that it's referring not just to ancient Israel coming up out of Egypt, but actually God's son coming out of Egypt that he called. Now these things foreshadow. They're not exactly proof that Jesus is the Messiah, but you can see hints of that in all of these that would indicate the birth of Jesus as is taught in the New Testament. In addition to that, we have some very specific prophecies. And so I believe because the Messiah would come of the lineage of King David. It was prophesied that Jesus would come from his seed. And what's important about this to understand is that in the 1st and 2nd century, the Jews rebelled against the Romans. And the Romans were so upset at the Jews that they destroyed all their cities. They annihilated a great part of the Jewish population. They demolished the temple. They got rid of all of the genealogies where the Jews could track their lineage. And so after the 2nd century all the way up to today, there is no person who could claim to be the lineage of David because all those documents have been destroyed. But we come to the birth of Jesus, who is before these events, and we have the lineage of David that is traced all the way to Jesus. And so it was to David. And it was to David, it was prophesied to David it was prophesied that from his very body, from himself would come the Messiah, the king who would reign on his throne forever. And this prophecy is repeated many times throughout the Old Testament. For example, in Psalms, Psalm says that the line of David, that his throne would be forever. And so there's many prophecies that talk about this line of the Messiah would come through David. And the great prophecy that Isaiah gives us, that is a Christmas message, which is, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. He will reign," notice, "on David's throne and over his kingdom." Now, this prophecy of Jesus is kind of amazing because he would be of the lineage of David, but he would be called Mighty God and Everlasting Father. Now, who of the lineage of David could claim to be called Mighty God or Everlasting Father? I mean, this narrows it down to a very specific person in the lineage of David who would be extraordinary, to be called Mighty God, to be called an Everlasting Father. This wasn't just some ordinary king. To narrow it down further, number 3, I believe because the Messiah was prophesied to come in the early part of the first century. If we look at the first century setting, people were expecting a Messiah to come. We see that in the wise men. They saw the sign in the stars. They were expecting something to happen. There were insurrectionists and zealots. And these were people who were trying to get the Messiah to come. They were trying to make the situation so the Messiah would come. We have the Samaritan woman. She was expecting a Messiah. Going on, there were false messiahs, people claiming to be the Messiah. There were those expecting the redemption of Israel, which was the Messiah coming. And just the general population of Israel was expecting a Messiah. So we ask, well, why were these people expecting the Messiah to come? I mean, why? Well, the reason is because 500 years before this, Daniel said the Messiah was going to come. He said in 77s, which is Hebrew terminology for 70 times 7 years, the Messiah would come. He said this would come in 490 years after the temple was being restored and Jerusalem was being rebuilt, the Messiah would come. Now, because the Jews who were in captivity came back to Jerusalem in 3 different waves, we don't know exactly, and people argue about exactly how this prophecy was being fulfilled. But no matter how you look at it, no matter how you trace it, no matter which interpretation you go with, you always end up with the Messiah in the early part of the first century. That's when Daniel said he would come. It would be the early part of the first century. And so the people could expect a Messiah in the first century. They would expect him of the lineage of David. And even more than that, the Old Testament tells us in what city he would be born. I believe because the Messiah was prophesied to be born in Bethlehem. Micah tells us that it was out of Bethlehem that a ruler would come, over all of Israel, the Messiah. And so when the wise men came looking for the Messiah, and they asked King Herod and the people in Jerusalem, where is he who is born King of the Jews? And they looked it up in the scriptures, and they said, oh, the scriptures tell us the king is going to be born in Bethlehem. And so the wise men knew they needed to go to Bethlehem. And so I believe because Jesus was born in Bethlehem. And so he was born in Bethlehem. It was prophesied he would come in the early part of the first century. He was of the lineage of King David. And number 5 is, I believe because the Messiah would be born of a virgin. Isaiah wrote 700 years before Jesus, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. Now, some people have said this word virgin could maybe mean something else, but just to point out that 200 years before Jesus was born, 200 years before he was born, the Hebrew scholars translated the Old Testament into Greek. And they chose a specific Greek word which means virgin. It means virgin, period, nothing else. And so 200 years before Jesus, they clarified that this would be a virgin who would be born the Messiah. And of course, Jesus fulfills this prophecy. He was born of a virgin. We know the story that's recorded in the Gospels. His name would be Emmanuel. And Emmanuel means God with us. If you think about it, if God is going to come and be with us and be one of us, his coming would be rather extraordinary. I mean, it really shouldn't surprise us that he was born of a virgin. Because if God was really going to come to this earth and be with us, it would have to be something extraordinary. And Isaiah said it was because and through the virgin birth it happened. So we have these things which really point strongly to the Messiah, and we can believe in Jesus. A story is told of some con artists. And these con artists sent letters to 2,000 people. And to these 2,000 people, they predicted who would win a football game. Half, they predicted one group, to 1,000, and to another 1,000, they predicted the other team. So that meant after the game, they were right half the time to 1,000 of those people. Well, then they sent a letter to those 1,000 people and predicted who would win the next football game. And of course, that meant they were right 500 times, because half of the time they predicted one team, and to the other half they predicted the other team. They were right 500 times. To those 500 people, they sent another letter, and they predicted who would win the next football game. Well, half of them, 250, got one team, and 250 got the other team. It meant they were right 250 times. So this means to 250 people, they had predicted who would win the football game correctly 3 times in a row. They sent to those 250 people letters. And to those letters they said, we will tell you who will win the next football game if you will send us a fee for the correct prediction. And of course, this fee would enable them to make a tidy sum of money. And of course, the people who did the right prediction, they could gamble and get their money back and much more just by gambling on the right team to win. And so, I mean, these guys had it all figured out, except they had one problem. Guess what? They sent those 250 letters, and one of those people was a gang leader. And so they managed to kidnap these people and threatened them and say, if you don't tell us who wins the next games, then you're really in bad trouble. We're going to kill you. And they tried to explain to the gang leaders the scam that they were doing, of how they were sending the letters. They said, no, you can't get it right 3 times in a row. I mean, you have to know who's going to win the next game. And the gang leaders weren't smart enough to catch on to the scam that was going on. And people kind of treat Christianity like that. They say, well, you know, there's these prophecies, there's this stuff going on, but how do we really know? Well, we know because there's no way we could have gone in and changed those documents that were written before the time of Jesus. I mean, the Old Testament is not a Christian book, it's a Jewish book, and there's no way that we could have gone in and changed those Dead Sea Scrolls and those other documents that showed. I mean, there's no way we could have done that. Now, it is true that there are some people who will use Christianity to scam other people and take advantage of other people. But if you look at the message of Jesus, and if you look at the Christian story, it is a true story. It is absolutely true. There's nothing false about it. And one of the ways we know it's so true is that these people wrote about Jesus before he was ever born. And who else but Jesus could ever fulfill those prophecies? But then if you add on top of that, they also prophesied about his ministry and his miracles. And they prophesied about his death and his burial and his resurrection. I mean, on and on they prophesied about this Messiah that would come. And Jesus perfectly fulfills those qualifications as the Messiah. And so this Christmas season, we can say that we believe. We can say that I believe. I believe because of the incidental details that foreshadow the birth of Jesus. I believe because the Messiah would come from the lineage of King David. I believe because the Messiah was promised to come in the early part of the 1st century. I believe because the Messiah was promised to be born in Bethlehem. And I believe because the Messiah would be born of a virgin. I believe that God sent his only Son to be born of a virgin. Jesus is totally, purely divine, as well as totally and purely virgin. And what makes Christmas Christmas is that. Christmas is not the tree like we have in the back with the lights. Christmas is not how we dress up or the parties we go to. It's not the presents and gifts that we give and receive. Christmas is Jesus. It is all about the Messiah, about Christ coming. And what I don't want us to do is to get caught up in the holiday season and not really focus our attention is, I believe that Jesus is the Messiah. He is God the Son who was born. What makes this season special is because of Jesus. Because he came, because he was born, because he is our promised Messiah, because we can believe in him. After Jesus was born, they were taking him to the temple so that sacrifices could be made because he was the firstborn. And as they brought him into the temple, he was met by two people, a woman named Anna and a man named Simeon. And God had promised Simeon that he would not die until he had seen the Messiah. And so they bring Jesus in as a baby, and Simeon takes Jesus from his parents' arms and holds him. And he's holding this baby, and he says, my eyes have seen your salvation. He's holding salvation in his very arms. And that's what we believe. That Jesus, that baby, that Simeon held in his arms, that precious baby is our salvation. And that is Christmas. That is Christmas. And if we don't have that, we don't have Christmas. I believe that Jesus came, that he would grow to a man, that he would perform many miracles, that he would give his life as an atoning sacrifice. He would raise from the dead. He would give us new life. I believe. We'll let the kids, are they going to come out? Do you want to see if they want to come out? Because we're going to take communion right now. And when we take communion, we're saying to Jesus, I believe. We believe that Jesus is our atoning sacrifice. So we'll just wait for a moment where they come out. And if you'd like to come and get communion, we can do that right now. As we take communion, we are saying, I believe. I believe that Jesus gave his life as an atoning sacrifice. I believe that he gives me forgiveness through his blood that washes away all my sins, that gives me a new life. I believe, and we thank you, Jesus. And as we take the bread, we are saying, Lord, I believe that Jesus carried our sins in his body, that he hung on the cross. I believe that Jesus is going to bodily return again. And Lord, I believe in the sacrifice, the love that you give us through Jesus. And as we enter into the Christmas, let's keep in mind what we believe and what makes Christmas Christmas.